One. We're back again. It's another episode of Breaking Down Security. I'm Brian Brake. Ms. Berlin, Mr. Betcher's with me this week.
Hello.
Yo.
Hey, so Ms. Berlin, you were on vacation, which is why we couldn't record last week. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. You're burning through your vacation days, to be honest.
I recorded when I was sick, so I feel like being on vacation is all right.
Oh,
We
right.
2 days vacation or just one?
Was I on? I went for 4 days.
Oh, wow. Boy, you're
Just
just...
take it out of my check.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to make that up in the next fiscal year or whatever that is.
All right. I'll just have to work overtime or something.
There you go.
Yeah, but I went to Atlanta. It was gorgeous.
Yeah? It was cold and snowy here. We just got snow again a couple days ago.
Yeah, it was also here. And now we're having a thunderstorm.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
Did you go
fun.
to Atlanta because you were helping them with their issues?
I was blamed for causing it, so I don't
Oh.
understand. Like, I know,
Wow. So you're like
I
the
didn't-
harbinger of ransomware then.
I guess.
Yeah. Which horseman was that? I forget. Of the apocalypse. Anyway. So.
The ransomware apocalypse.
Ransomware.
horseman.
Yeah. The ransomware horseman. Yeah. All right. Well, so this, we're late this week and for good reason. I'm going to turn down the audio a little
All my
bit.
fault.
Yeah. No, that's okay. We are having an interview this week. We have Ms. Megan Roddie on the show, but I'm going to turn the show over at this point. What'd I say? Oh, shit. I did it wrong.
Just talking about this. Miss Megan Roddie, everybody.
Roddie. God bless.
All right. It's all right.
Okay. Those of you-
I'm just going to turn the show over to Mr. Betcher so he can introduce our guest this week and get it right.
So yeah, I went to Besides Austin a few weeks ago and attended as many talks as I could. And one of the talks I went to was on neurodiversity. So I figured, you know what, this could benefit everybody in their job if they actually listen to what was in the talk and maybe took it back to work. And if they're a hiring manager, wow, it would benefit them a lot because a lot of managers need teams that have a diversity of skills, a diversity of thought and everything. So I learned a lot. The talk was mainly about something called HFAs, and we'll get into that. Welcome, Megan Roddie, to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Excellent.
All right, well, let's get started. And okay, so the talk was on diversity. So I basically went in there because for the reason that I read this one book, First Break All the Rules, what the world's greatest managers do differently. And one thing that they do differently is hire for strengths, not the lack of weaknesses. So I went ahead and had Amanda, or let's say I encouraged them, Amanda and Bryan, and also Megan, to take this Strengths Finder test, which First Break All the Rules kind of says, hey, you should probably take this test and find out your strengths, right? So you can highlight your strengths, and potentially if you're on a great and diverse team, your weaknesses become irrelevant with the strengths of others. Okay, so we kind of scored ourselves, and I took the test. Megan, why don't you go over some of your strengths and kind of give us feedback on what you got out of it? Maybe did you learn something about yourself, or is it kind of something you already knew, or sort of highlighted what you thought?
Yeah, I think it kind of fell in line with what I expected to get out of it. Number one was I had the achiever trait, which kind of made sense. I like to win at things. Even though like logically I know that like my paper achievements don't mean much, like nothing makes me happier than hanging up a award on the wall that says "good job." Like in the long run, it doesn't mean much, but it drives me, like having something to accomplish, a goal to meet, getting a certification, winning an award. And then learner and intellect are up there. I'm very driven by learning all the things I can learn and growing my mind in the field. And focus and harmony seemed along the lines too. Harmony, the way it was phrased is that I don't like fighting. Like I'll do anything to steer a conversation away from an argument. Like I don't want to debate anything with you. So what I got out of it was kind of fell in line with what I thought I'd get. I liked more seeing kind of the stack of a larger group of people and how there's like some overlap in some places, but then deviation elsewhere. And it was more interesting for me to see it as a group than it was as me as an individual.
Excellent.
Right.
Good observation. So, Bryan, how about you? Were you surprised?
I've taken these things before. There's the Dale Carnegie has one, the Briggs-Meyer. I don't know.
Now, those are personality profiles, not really talents, right? Well, there's a difference here. This is focused on what you're good at, what your talent is, not really what kind of personality you have or how you relate to others. I mean, they're similar.
True. When I took it, the problem was there were some things that I was completely neutral on. It was like, oh, would you rather be, rich or would you rather be, respected? And I was like, can I have both?
Yes.
Yeah. It's like I want to be right down the middle. There was like a good dozen or so that I was like completely split down the middle. So, on any given day, if I'd been like, I want to be rich, would it have changed my thing here? I often wonder about the objectivity of these because on specific days, whether or not I have coffee or whatever mood I'm in, maybe I don't want to learn that day. But my biggest one, and of course my wife was not surprised by this one, was learner. Learner was my top one. It said you love to learn. Subject matter that interests you most will be determined by your other themes and experiences. So the outcome of the learning is less significant than getting there. So I thought that was quite good. I'm always constantly trying to learn, so that makes kind of makes sense. So ideation was the other one.
Achiever, I'd like to point that out.
As an achiever,
it's different than achiever,
right?
For example, you don't care if you achieve anything as long as the journey is what excites you, right?
Right. Yeah. Not getting to the end. Yeah. I don't worry about, crossing the finish line. I just like running the race. So, ideation was another one. It says you're fascinated by ideas. It says you're delighted when you discover beneath the complex surface an elegantly simple concept to explain why things are the way they are. So that was quite interesting. I didn't actually think I was like that, but that apparently does work for me. Futuristic was another one. You're the kind of person who loves to peer over the horizon. The future fascinates you. I do like me some Star Trek. We did talk about this before, so I do like. Yeah,
you overheard something. Yeah,
yeah, you overheard some. It's a shame it didn't make it on the blooper reel. So, while the exact content of the picture will depend on your other strengths and interests, a better product, better team, better life, or better world will always be inspirational to you. It says, I'm a dreamer who sees visions of what could be and cherishes those visions. So, the last two were significance and focus. It says, I want to be very significant in the eyes of other people. This is probably that. Do you want to be rich or do you want to be famous or respected or whatever? Apparently, I hit pretty hard on that one. So you want to stand out. You want to be known. In particular, you want to be known. Actually, the reason we started this podcast was for that exact reason. So, which is kind of funny. So, and focus.
Which is why you don't want to change it to Berlining down security.
Exactly.
So much struggle.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't make sense, word-like, the play on words, pun thing, Anyway. So finally, the focus thing, it says you ask yourself this question every day. Where am I headed? Guided by this theme of focus, you need a clear destination. So it kind of fits along the lines of the learner thing where it's like it's not the end of the journey, it's the journey itself. So I, have to ask myself where I'm going. So
and we all have learner.
Yeah, we all do in some way,
All
shape, or
have burner.
form, and it's not all. It's all fairly high. So I mean,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
are all, just to explain the test is there's not really a wrong or right answer. You kind of lean one way or the other, and it's not black and white. It's like white and meatloaf,
Yeah.
something like that. You have to choose between like Brake's example, but there are 170 questions, and you gotta go through it like that because there's a time limit of 20 seconds on each question.
Yeah, something
you don't
like that.
answer
Yeah.
right away, and basically first thing to come to mind. And there's about 24 strengths that they highlight, and these are the top 5.
Yeah. You can actually pay extra for the test to get all 34 that are available, but after about 5, it's like I think the percentage drops fairly quickly. So I'm not sure why you would need all 34. Before we talked on the show, it was like maybe we would use that to find out what we would be weak against, so that we could help. When we're hiring people or whatever, we can go, okay, I'm not strong in maximizer, so maybe we need to find some people who are strong in the maximizer bit to kind of round out the team.
Yeah. All right. So Amanda, you got anything to say about the test?
Yeah, so I had the same thoughts because like anytime I would take a Myers-Briggs test, like I'm pretty even keel with everything, and I end up just like being a random Myers-Briggs, depending on the day. Like,
Right.
and even the percentages they give you, it's like, oh, you're only 5% E compared to the I. I'm like, all right, well, that doesn't really help me much.
Right.
So I wondered if it would kind of be the same thing for this. But yeah, my top one was restorative, which is kind of like a fixer, I guess. It says you're good at figuring out what's wrong and resolving it. And that's actually why I got into IT, because I liked fixing things and finding out what was wrong with them. So I thought that part was interesting. And then I have learner input, which is like gathering and archiving information. Ideation, which is you're able to find connections between seemingly disparate phenomena. And then focus, which is being able to stay on track, prioritize, then act, which I'm not really that good on. Or at least I didn't think I was that good at.
My wife says, yeah, I'm pretty much, squirrel, and unless it's like something I'm really like interested in doing, and then it's like razor sharp focus.
I have to do like 5-10 things at a time. Otherwise I get bored.
Right.
But I guess I could focus on those 5 to 10 things.
Yeah.
I
I don't know. So my opinion on this. So my number 1 was maximizer. I like to seek out the strengths in people and help them with their strengths. And that got me thinking that this test was kind of BS a little bit because, I don't see myself as a maximizer. I was just thinking about strengths are good and weaknesses are sort of irrelevant, right? So that I didn't really like the test because of the results I got. I think that it does lend some credence to basically, hey, here's some guidelines for you. Here's some of the things we think are your strengths, but take it with a grain of salt, Like, Bryan, when was the last time you actually read a book cover to cover? Speaking of focus.
Wow.
Right?
Just put me right on the spot there.
Yeah.
Last week
was it in the 1900s or?
Uh,
I mean, really, you're probably the second most unfocused person that I know.
wait, what?
Right? And yet, your focus, you said it yourself, squirrel, right? So I'm not thinking this test is entirely accurate, although it does have some good points.
So in many cases, you're thinking it's a lot like a horoscope where it's kind of generic.
Well, no, I think it's how you're feeling at the time.
Right.
Right. If you're thinking at the time, well, I need to work on my focus because I just couldn't finish that project, right? Because I was doing too many things at once. And so you're thinking to yourself, I need to focus more.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're taking this test and they ask you questions about your focus. And so that's in the front of your mind.
So did you read the book before you did the test, Betcher?
I did.
Okay.
I read First Break All the Rules a few years ago.
I broke all the rules and took the test before I read the book.
Oh yeah, I didn't read it.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't read Strengths Finder 2. I read First Break All the Rules, which they did talk about your strengths.
Okay.
And I have an example here in the show notes regarding General Grant and General Lee, right? So before Lincoln chose Grant, he had appointed in succession 3 or 4 generals whose main qualifications were their lack of major weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So he basically had to get rid of those generals because they were ineffective.
Right.
So the picking the generals for their lack of major weaknesses didn't work. So then the turning point was when he appointed Grant, which because Lincoln chose his general for ability to win battles, not for the absence of weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as we probably all know the story, Grant came as a great general, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So, anyway, that's like the theme of this first part of this podcast is weaknesses are made irrelevant by the strengths of others.
Right.
Right. You guys agree with that? Or, I mean, as long as you have a diverse team, you could accomplish a lot of things. Whereas if everybody on the team is good at math and not relationships, something like that, your team may fall apart.
You also have to have someone, though, who knows how to utilize those diversity of skills. A manager who's able to recognize where the skill sets lie and how to assign tasks accordingly. Because I could have strengths in math and someone has strengths in communication, but if you have a manager who doesn't want to look at and identify, or who doesn't have the skills to think critically about who would be best fit for tasks, then maybe I end up in a communication task. Somebody good at communication ends up with math, and now we're in that poor spot. So I think it is true that the diversity, like other people's strengths, can make up for my weaknesses, but as long as that assumes that we're being coordinated correctly and we're utilizing that mindset correctly. That's
right. And that's why some of the best companies, for example, who am I thinking of? Bill Gates? He had another guy with him, right? So Bill Gates was the ideator, right? He had these great ideas, and it was his partner who implemented those ideas.
Right.
A lot of these great people have somebody on the side, probably somebody on the sidelines who maybe aren't great presenters of their ideas, but they dang sure can implement those ideas effectively.
Right. So
Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, they're perfect examples.
So my issue with a lot of these survey things is they attempt to categorize or put you in a specific cluster or group of people. Mm-hmm. And like we've been talking, I think on any given day, you could be any one of these things. Like some days I just don't want to do anything. I just want to sit around and watch, TV and, guys' grocery games or whatever on Food Network. I don't want to learn anything. And then there's other days where it's like, man, just give it to me. I want to drink from that fire hose. Megan had a good point about, you have to have a manager who can, play to those strengths and understand people's weaknesses. If a manager who can do that is building the team, what would the Clifton strengths for that guy or that person look like when they're building out their team?
You mean for the manager?
Yeah. Like what would be the top 5 for a manager who would be able to figure out, strengths and weaknesses of people?
I don't think it really matters. I mean, certainly Maximizer would help, but I don't think it matters what the manager's strengths are as long as he recognizes that there are strengths and weaknesses that all people have. Mm-hmm. And you need to be able to recognize what those people's strengths are. And if you read First Break All the Rules, they have examples of interview questions that you can ask to find out whether somebody is actually strong in a particular area.
Mm-hmm.
You'll ask them a question. They may think they're strong in an area, but based on their answer, you may find out there's no way that he's strong in that.
Right.
And, yeah, it's been a couple of years since I read it, but that's why I recommend the book, because this is Gallup, right? They did a survey of all the greatest managers they could find.
Right.
They found that they all had certain things in common.
Yeah.
And what were they? Well, I'm not prepared to list them all, but hey, maybe we can do another podcast on that.
Mm-hmm.
In the book StrengthsFinder 2, and since you read it, Bryan, you recall the Roddie story in the book, right?
I actually didn't read it.
Well, Roddie, a famous football player here in America, his dream was to play for the University of Notre Dame. So he did everything he could to get into the university, to play for the team. He was a water boy, which means you basically go around and give the real players drinks and make sure their helmets are polished for the next game and things. He was on the practice squad, which meant he got hit by the starters every week, every day. And he basically worked the hardest on the team. And he finally made the team at the end, but he never played. And then on the final game, the final play of the game, when the game was already in hand, they just had to run out the clock, he was put in for one play. And he made a great play. He sacked the quarterback. So we're all supposed to say, well, wow, that's the American dream, or that's what we should all be celebrating. Somebody goes in, they have a dream, and they achieve their dream. But according to StrengthsFinder or whatever, he was not a good football player. That was not his strength.
Right.
Others put in a lot less time, a lot less effort, and were 10 times the player he was.
Right.
If he would have focused all the time and attention on his strength, he probably would have achieved something far greater than having one play on one game that didn't even matter.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So,
all right. So in the show notes, I have Megan, your sports team quote. You want to kind of go into what led you to give this talk, and maybe a little bit about yourself and how that relates to strengths and neurodiversity and things like that.
Yeah, so this talk grew out of kind of like, it's more of a personal experience talk. I'm not like a lot of these conferences, it's people talking on technical topics in fields they're experts in. For me, it's all focused on this being me speaking on personal experiences. I have Asperger's syndrome, which is a kind of high functioning autism. And I realized I wanted to speak at conferences. I was attending conferences and a friend recommended I speak. And I was like, well, I haven't been in cybersecurity long or, been in the industry long. So what do I speak about? And it was actually one of my managers who knew I had Asperger's syndrome. They said, well, it's up to you whether you're comfortable on it, but you could have a really, really great talk just talking to people about your experiences working in the industry with Asperger's syndrome. So I decided that was a good idea. I was comfortable speaking about it. And so the talk, I didn't want to focus so narrowly. So my talk really focuses on high functioning autism and that group of people. But I named it Strengthening Your SecOps Team by Leveraging Neurodiversity, because the overarching theme of the entire talk is that while there's neurodiversity is you see a lot of disabilities or conditions that are viewed negatively. I'm trying to highlight the strengths, because I notice I have weaknesses, and that I am diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome for a reason. I have disabilities and things that would be considered negative that impact my day-to-day life, my work life. So my thing is that despite that, there's things that come out of my neurodiversity that will strengthen your team. And so my talk is very much about strengths and weaknesses, but from the perspective of someone who has like kind of diagnosed weaknesses in a way, and how I'm hoping that people will, instead of focusing on the weaknesses associated with a condition, focus it on the strengths associated with a condition.
Right on.
Yeah.
Excellent. So what is high functioning autism? Typically see.
So high functioning autism, so a lot of people have heard of autism. Like typically most people you'll meet knows of someone or even have a friend of a friend with high functioning autism or with autism. And high functioning autism is just kind of the higher end of the spectrum, where you're looking at individuals who do have who aren't lacking in an intellectual capacity. So they speak intellectually. They are at the same mental capacity in terms of education as their peers, or higher than their peers, are ahead in school in some cases, or ahead from a career education perspective. But their weaknesses are in social and behavioral areas. So weaknesses in social interactions and understanding what's appropriate, or weaknesses in processing sensory conditions. So sensitiveness to different light or different textures and stuff like that can affect their ability to live day to day.
So what are some of the strengths of HFAs?
So one thing I like to mention during my talk is that, like, when I talk about these things, I'm not trying to like put every single person with high functioning autism in a bucket, because everybody's different. It's the same as neurotypical people. Everyone's going to be different. Just because you're neurotypical doesn't mean that you're all alike. Same thing. So the things that I identify as my strengths stemming from my Asperger's syndrome and high functioning autism are things like my ability to be highly productive and efficient in what I do. I can typically do things twice as fast as other people. I'm good at repetitive tasks. I don't get bored with them typically. I enjoy doing repetitive things and figuring out the most efficient way to knock out those tasks. I can pay attention to things, especially things I'm interested in, for very, very long periods of time. So I'm very thorough with my work. I'm very passionate about the work I do, and I put as much effort as I can into it, no matter what the work is. And so those are kind of strengths. And again, like, those aren't things I could say are with every individual with high functioning autism, but those are some of the traits you'll see among a huge chunk of the community.
So it sounds like some of the traits that you have mentioned there with the repetitive tasks and things would be, does that mean you go looking for specific jobs that you would know would have those kinds of qualities in them? I mean, you would almost treat those as skills, right? Where I enjoy watching paint dry, or I enjoy, looking at, screens of text scrolling down consistently. I mean, those would be skills.
It's definitely a thing that comforts me. And, while it's not like, I don't necessarily look for jobs that will have those tasks, but while at a job, I will seek out performing tasks like that. So if somebody's like, hey, I need someone to copy and paste these 500 lines of text, one line at a time, over to this other document for whatever reason, like, I'd be like, sure, that's me. I can do that. And so, like, boring, repetitive tasks, like, so while not necessarily a job would come in mind that I would go to for that, I would, within my job, identify that as something that I'd be strong at or want to do and could do efficiently and quickly and take it on.
Right. Okay.
So do you find routines comforting as well? Like, do you have a routine every day?
Yeah. And so I love finding a routine. Routines comfort me. When I get out of routines, I find just my general day to day get harder. And the thing is, like, being in incident response, like, routine is so hard to do because I don't know what's coming during the day. Like that's like one of the things that kind of, I love incident response and doing DFIR and stuff, but like when I go into work, like, I don't know if I could be responding to emails and then 2 seconds later it's like, stop, okay, there's ransomware, time to respond, and like pulled away. And that's like one of the hardest parts about being an incident responder for me. Luckily, I love the work enough that I get past it. But what I do is I work in little routine day to day. So even though I may not know what's happening 8 to 5, I do know that every morning before I go into work, I can stop at Whataburger, Chick-fil-A. It used to be Whataburger, but I changed. So now I go to Chick-fil-A every morning and I go get myself a soda and a chicken biscuit and I go to work. And that's like that one thing that stays the same every morning. So it's even though I can't keep the same level of routine that I would if I were in a different field of work, I do find the little things that I can keep the same every day. And those kinds of things like comfort me because I know that even though I don't know what's happening while at work and whether there will be an incident or whether I'll just be responding to emails all day, I do know that every morning I'll be starting my morning with a chicken biscuit from Chick-fil-A.
Hey, no complaints here.
Yeah.
When I lived in Austin, I used to go to Whataburger and get the biscuits and gravy, but I would just eat the biscuit and like slurp the gravy on the way to work. Don't me. Don't you judge me. That's good gravy.
I do have one question that's, I guess, somewhat related. So what do you think would be a benefit of being diagnosed as HFA? Just because I have 3 sons and I am 90% sure the youngest is.
Boy, that's
seriously, everything that you've talked about is like completely spot on, pretty much to like him.
Twitter makes things really interesting because there's a huge autism community on Twitter, and you'll meet such a variety of people, and a lot of them are like people in their 40s or 50s who at the time when they were at the age where you'd usually be diagnosed, like people weren't diagnosing autism correctly. And so they're just now being diagnosed in their 50s, and almost the entire consensus I see around there is like being diagnosed is great, like, because it's kind of like that reassurance that like, nothing's wrong. You're not imagining these things. And like, well, it's like, oh, you're being diagnosed, and that can be scary, especially when you're young. The diagnosis and treatment and stuff like that can be scary words. Like, it's knowing that there's a reason for things. And then at that point you can start understanding like, okay, well, I have this, that's not going to change, but there's also 1% of the world that has this. Let's see what they're doing. Okay, well, how have they learned to cope with this? There's like such a big community on Twitter and, local autism socialization communities that I think knowing is better, and that official diagnosis in a way is good because it gets you quicker to that path of like acceptance and learning about how to adjust and grow off of your strengths and stuff like that, instead of not knowing and just thinking maybe there's something weird or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
So I have a question. I'm looking through your slides here, and I love the slides. Is this template available in Google, by the way? Because I submitted it.
It's not built into Google, but Slide Carnival, I think it's called.
Okay.
They make Google Slides, and I steal all their templates because they're great.
Genius. Anyway,
yes.
So as a manager, building a team. And so when you interview for jobs, did you tell your boss, hey, I am this, or did you just let them figure it out after you were hired? Because I was just wondering if you fall under certain disability guidelines or anything like that where you work at for this.
So yeah, technically with ADA, like American Disabilities Association Act or whatever.
Yeah.
All that, autism does fall under that. So you can like declare disability with your work. And then if you require accommodations, they're legally required to help. I did not file for ADA just because there was no support from the company at like a financial level or any sort of like business adjustments they have to make.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I said it during my interview for my particular job I'm at now. At some jobs, like I would highlight, like they always ask that strengths and weaknesses question. What's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness? And before doing this talk, like I was never able to answer those questions. And like now, like probably I could probably do it because I give this talk every few weeks. And it's like I list my strengths and weaknesses. I don't know why it was so hard before. But I don't see the need to. I do at work now. I talk to my managers because situations come up in which I act away and it's like, whoa, that wasn't cool. And so I explain myself why it happens. And now when we have new employees come on, I'll typically message them privately when they come on and say, hey, just so you know, everyone's aware. I have Asperger's syndrome and I might upset you inadvertently. And I want you to know like the situation I'm in so that you can help me by letting me know that I did something to offend you without thinking that this is something I was purposely trying to offend you. And now I'm just a terrible coworker and you hate your job. So
some examples of that. Do you have any stories?
I was going to ask about exampple, but I didn't know how to phrase that. Thank you, Mr. Patrick.
Yeah. So
I'll get right to the point.
I get offended by my 6-year-old a lot.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm pretty sure we should have just brought my coworkers in as a panel because I'm pretty sure if you ask that question, they pull out a little notebook of all the time. But, I mean, one generic thing I do, I like not necessarily offending, but I talk really loud. I definitely speak at a louder than average voice level. And that tends to frustrate people. When you're working in a 12-foot by 12-foot sock and there's 10 people, they don't want you speaking like you're on a stage in an auditorium.
Right.
So that like frustrates people. And it's been a lot of like us trying to work on it together, like me trying to work on remembering to keep my voice level down inside and them trying to remember not to just like yell at me and like tell me to be quiet and all that. So in terms of actually offending people, I know I've done it, but I'm sure they'll be happy to give you a list of all the things I've said in the past to offend them. But like I said, a lot of the times I don't realize I'm doing it. So, but yeah.
I have the same issue, but I just blame it on my tinnitus because sometimes my wife will tell me you're shouting, and I don't actually realize that I'm shouting. But yeah,
yep. No, it's all good. They got used to it, and so I have to. But I know it annoys them, but we work on it together. It doesn't benefit them to yell at me, and it doesn't benefit me to continually make them mad. So.
Right. So if you're a manager and you have just seen your talk and you're like, well, Megan, what do I do? I want to hire, people who are HFA. What would my company need to know to be able to better accommodate hiring folks like yourself?
Yeah. So in terms of reaching the high functioning autistic community, a lot of it, I think, starts with the job posting because me and other individuals like me takes things very literally. So like a lot of people who are job hunting, neurotypicals, like they know that like job requirements are job like kind of requirements. Like if it says 3 years experience and you've got 2.5, like you're like, okay, well, I'm still gonna apply for this. But like an individual with high functioning autism, like if it says 3 years experience and I have 2 years and 11 months experience, I'm gonna be like, oh, well, can't apply for this right now. Like it's like a measurement stick at a theme park. Like if I don't meet that height, I'm walking away. I'm not like stepping on my tippy toes trying to figure out if I can maybe meet it. Like, no. So job postings, like, we got to be more careful in the industry where we're saying requirements, hard requirements. You have to have this many years in this exact specific language, and you need to have this many years of education in this exact field. Like, we really need to think about how we're phrasing our job postings and how that's not just restricting down on the number of neurodiverse applicants, but applicants in general. But it's a real struggle with individuals with autism who are looking at job postings. And when we take everything so literally, like, it took so much training in my mind to start thinking of job postings differently, because even now I still see job postings and I'm like, well, technically I'm 3 months off of that education, or, well, they said to have a bachelor's in computer science and I only have a master's in computer science, so not a bachelor's. What? So I'm not going to do that. So that kind of thing. What? Yeah. That's the logic. If people tell me they're looking for a bachelor's in computer science, right, I don't, like, in my brain, I'm like, well, technically my bachelor's is in mathematics, so they don't want me. Like, even though maybe, yeah, my education later on in life focused on computer science, that's not what they're looking for. They're asking me what my bachelor's is in, type thing.
Do you ever ask, like, a second opinion? Do you ever ask anybody, hey, do you think I'd be qualified for that job? Even, you know, I don't want to say, hey, do you ever ask neurotypical people if,
yeah,
you know,
well, actually, I actually do. I've learned a lot in general in career areas. I've learned to kind of middleman a lot of my thoughts to people who are neurotypical. In terms of job hunting, I've actually been quite lucky. I'm really, really young into, I've only been in my current job a year and like 3/4, less than 2 years, and it's my first full-time job. Nice. So I don't have much job hunting experience, so I probably really shouldn't be speaking on job hunting, but
right.
But in terms of other stuff in general, if I'm ever thinking something and I'm not really sure if I'm approaching it appropriately, I usually have a couple of people who I middleman it to, and I'll like send it to them, and I'll be like, especially when it's like where I want to approach a potentially sensitive topic with someone at work and I don't want to, you know, upset anyone, I'll like message a trusted friend and be like, hey, you know, this person did this and I think that wasn't cool. Should I bring it up to them? And that person will usually either be like, yeah, that's really not cool. How about you try and discuss it with them? Or they'll be like, look, you're blowing things out of proportion. That's not what they meant by that. Like, because I also misinterpret things. So it's always good to understand your limitations. And so things like with job postings, like autistic individuals, if they're looking at something, like if they have that feeling that maybe they should apply, but like they're not sure, well, one, it's a job application, apply. And if that person isn't going to take you, they're not going to take you. Might as well. But for everything in general, if you're ever thinking, you know, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, then recognize that you reading that job posting might not be your greatest strength, and that you have a friend or someone who you can text and say, hey, I was looking at this job posting. Do you think there's an issue with me applying?
Okay.
Talk about the approachability that you have toward other people, especially people in power like management. I think HFAs tend to shy away from talking to their managers about whatever, because I don't know why. Maybe they might be bothered, or they may feel that their manager would be bothered by them, or they'll be out of place talking to their manager about a particular topic.
Yeah. I think it's very much the latter side of what you said, that it's more about the comfort level of going and speaking to a manager. Another thing that I've always had is like where I see like kind of hierarchy in the workplace, like those have always felt like really strict boundaries to me. Like, I am an analyst, they are the operations manager. Like, I find that kind of person like very hard to approach, even though I've been in a place where like my managers have made themselves approachable and like try to be one of the team. Like, even though I recognize that like logically, like just how my brain works, I'm just like, they're my manager. Like, I can't go with them with most stuff. Like I prefer being reached out to, and that's why a lot of times I suggest in my talks that the managers, like part of my thing is that you may not realize, like, just because I'm not coming to you and telling you something's wrong doesn't mean there's nothing wrong.
Right.
There's a high possibility there is, because me and other individuals with HFA aren't going to feel comfortable going to someone of superiority, especially when we think we might be being a bother, or it's like, oh, but this is only something that affects me, and they're just going to get mad if I tell them that they need to change something because of me, type thing. So a lot of another big part of this kind of mindset shift is making sure that managers know that they should also, occasionally reach out to that person. Because I'd likely be more comfortable if my manager came to me and said, hey, I noticed that you seemed upset about XYZ. Is everything okay there? I'm more likely to respond to that and be like, oh, no, that's that situation. I hated it. Can we talk about that? Than me, like, just not liking a situation and approaching you. I'd rather it be brought up to me and me respond than have to go directly to you. So
it does sound like So instead of the employee going to the manager should go to the employee. It sounds like you one-on-ones and one-on-one time would be very powerful for you to have. Before we talked on the show, that we started the show, you mentioned like at least quarterly, but everywhere I've worked, we have meetings weekly where my manager and I sit down, and in bigger corporations, you probably have regular weekly or bi-weekly one-on-ones where y'all sit down and you discuss issues that you've been having. So it seems like having those with people who are HFA or something like that would be very useful for them.
Yeah. And especially since, like I said, sometimes I don't notice what I'm doing. And so I may be doing something that's upsetting you, and I may be doing it regularly, like it's part of my daily behavior that you've noticed. And it's good to like have that time for you to tell me what I like, kind of point out those things where I'm in a comforting setting. Like that one-on-one time is like, okay, like I know this is a time where my manager is going to tell me like what things I need to improve on. And this is not like spur of the moment, negative reaction, something happened and now I'm being chewed out and you're telling me everything I'm doing wrong. Like it's nice to have that one-on-one moment where it's like, okay, let's set this time aside for us to evaluate where I need to improve, what things I've been doing that maybe I haven't noticed, because I'd rather learn about the things I'm doing that are upsetting people or that I'm doing incorrectly and could improve on. So having that time to discuss those things. And then again, having that time where I feel that management is more approachable. I'm in a one-on-one and that the manager is asking me, what do you need from me? Or what things have been bothering you recently, type thing. Having that moment where it's kind of like, okay, this is a set time for me to tell you what I need and what's been happening that's going wrong, rather than just trying to figure out how to work that in a passing conversation in the middle of the day.
So in the show notes, I put some guidance in there on one-on-ones, and typically what is recommended is a 30-minute every week, 10 minutes for the direct report first, at least 10 minutes for the manager, and then 10 minutes to talk about the future, like what your career is like, whatever you want to talk about. If you want to talk about work and what you want to do in the future, what projects you want to work on, you can talk about that as well. But it's mainly the employee, not the manager, or the direct, not the manager, that starts first. And they can talk about if they want to talk about their cats.
Yeah.
About the cats, right? So I put that in, and that gives everyone the opportunity in a comfortable setting to discuss whatever they want to.
Yeah, and the kind of guide form thing that you attach there too, that it's like one of those things that I like forms, and I like fill in the blanks and directions. So I really like the form that says like, ask this, ask that, talk about this, talk about that. So it's definitely a great resource that's been provided. So thanks for digging that up.
Can I ask a question?
I know there's guidance on if your manager doesn't do one-on-ones every week with you, there's something you can do to kind of encourage them to do that. Right.
What is pants?
I was going to ask that too. Pants?
Oh, that was that
I
is
put that in. Sorry.
Yes, it's to reference one of my slides. I think it's still in the slide deck.
Okay.
If you guys have that up, it's slide number 15. It's something I talk about. It's one of the bizarre quirks, behavioral things that you look at a person with a neurodiverse condition and think that person is a weirdo. Something is wrong with their brain. I own 5 pairs of the exact same gene and the exact same size. And every time I go to the mall, I see if they still sell those jeans and if they're on sale, because I'm very sensitive about the fabrics and stuff I wear. So to reduce a stress point in my life, which is clothes shopping, I just buy all of the same clothes. So that my pants are one of my examples of one of my quirks that most people would think is weird, but there's a really logical reason for it. It's knocking out a pain point in my life.
That's not odd. I actually buy my jeans on Amazon, and because it keeps my buying history, I just go back in and buy the same pants. Except I accidentally buy the color that of 529s that I wear that are stretchy. So I've learned to not buy that color anymore because
stretchy
they always
jeans are amazing. I don't know what you're talking about.
Look, I don't do the skinny jean thing. My wife likes them, but they feel weird on me. So I
learned about it because I got a few pair of pants. My mom took me clothes shopping when I was a teenager, and my waist and leg size hasn't grown much since my late teens. And so I wore this pair and I wore them until they were literally riddled with holes and I could not wear them anymore. And it was this huge, dramatic thing for me. It shouldn't have been a big deal, but I was miserable. They were Guess brand, I think. My mom literally emailed Guess corporate, and said, please dig out a pair of these exact jeans in your warehouse before my daughter has a meltdown.
Nice.
She needs help. And so I was never again will I ever buy one pair of jeans I like, because
I had to do the exact same thing with pants earlier this year, actually.
Yeah.
So your communication that you have with your manager and your one-on-ones, not only is one-on-ones and having communication important, but the method by which your manager communicates with you is I'm referring to slide 28, where you talk about response to a neurotypical employee, where you say, great idea, let's reapproach when we have more resources available. Yeah. It seems like you mentioned your more rigidity, your more structure. Mm-hmm. The response that you have for the HFA employee kind of reminds me of that rigidity or that structure, where you have to kind of understand why we're not having that, and then be sure to remind me in exactly a couple of weeks.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So a lot of communication with me, I needed to be very direct,
succinct,
no subjectivity, all objective, straight up, 2 weeks, not less busy, because I don't know what less busy is, or my less busy, that's a subjective term. I might not be busy, but if you're busy, who's busy are we talking about? So that, and also a lot of just get straight to the point with me type thing. Beating around the bush or trying to hint at things isn't going to do me any good. Even if you're trying to break something to me gently, you're just going to frustrate me more beating around the bush. I'd rather you just come out and tell me directly what it is. So the
example is, if I can remember correctly, I don't have the slides in front of me, is you come up with an idea, you present that idea to your manager, and they say, well, yeah, that sounds great. We'll do it when we have more time or more free time.
Exactly. Remind me about it when we're less busy. And that's kind of well, that's subjective to me though. Less busy is a subjective state, because I can take on a lot more than other people can. So maybe I'm not busy, but do you want me to come to you then, or do you want me to come to you when you're less busy? But how do I know you're less busy? Because it's you. So it's kind of all these things racking my brain around it, where if you tell me like 2 weeks, or like tell me 2 months, 2 years, tell me never for all I cared. But like, I need something more solid where I can put a reminder on a calendar and remember to come back to you, not have to think about your state of mind, because I can barely understand my state of mind. I don't need to be thinking about what you're thinking.
So it's more like it has to be observable and measurable versus subjective. So you have to
exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because it's hard enough for me in general to think about your kind of to empathize in a way, or to kind of like understand where you're coming from, understand your state of mind. So like for me to try and interpret when you're less busy, like that was difficult enough, but to have something such as bringing a subject back to you, rely on that, like that just increases the stress. So like I don't care when it has to be. Like if you tell me, yeah, this is never going to happen, like I'll be content. Or if you tell me we can do that, but you're going to have to wait 2 years till it's your turn, fine. Like I'll wait 2 years, but I'd rather know I'm waiting 2 years than have to rack my brain around what you're thinking is busy versus not busy.
Do you ever reach back to your boss when he gives you like the neurotypical response and you go, okay, what's less busy for you, boss? Or do you ever ask that question, or you just kind of let it slide and go, well, he doesn't understand?
I've learned to now, because I think in the past I would have, like, because this grew out of that actually grew out of a real world example of something I experienced. They said less busy. And then I think it basically in the end, things blew up because I got frustrated. And then it was like little things like this that continue to blow up. Then I blew up, and then it ended in like us discussing like what went wrong. Why did it come to the point where I blew up and I caused all these issues? And it's like, well, things like this, I don't understand why this project isn't happening. And it's like, well, you said be less busy. And it's like, well, yeah, but when is less busy? So I've learned over time, and like this entire talk, this is not stuff like I went in, started working, and like I knew all this stuff, so now I'm teaching it. This is like, I took the bullet, and so I'm gonna save you now from like, so that's why it's both to managers and to other individuals with high functioning autism, to help them know what I've learned. So that is something where I have learned now with, yes, if they forget, because I don't expect them to like remember every little thing they have to do differently. Like, so when they say less busy, now I go, okay, well, does that mean 2 weeks, or like, do you have a better time? Like I'll kind of nudge for something more. But initially I probably would have been like, oh, well, clearly that's what it's less busy, of course. And in the end I learned, well, I'm not gonna accept that. So
do you ever set like reminders in your calendar to go, well, okay, he told me less busy, so I'm just gonna say a week from now, go back and go,
Yeah. So when I kind of figure out, and that's why I like those like solid timelines, I utilize the Slack built-in /remind commands all the time. I have so many reminders set. So basically anytime somebody tells me a time frame, I have a reminder set ready to remind me like, okay, they said I could come back to this now. And because that kind of like keeps out of my mind. It's like, well, I had that idea, but let's like, what's the point in thinking about it right now? Like I'll go back to in 2 weeks, and it helps me like move on and think about new things.
That's fabulous.
That's
okay.
The getting things done method right there. Have you read that book?
No, I have not.
Okay. Maybe you should.
Yeah.
You don't have to, because you already do a lot of that stuff. Set reminders for yourself and stop thinking about it. Get your mind off the little things and stop worrying.
Yep.
The reminder's gonna remind you in the proper time. So whenever you come to something that you need, okay, in 2 weeks, set that reminder. Don't rely on yourself to somehow remember that.
Yeah.
So okay. So if I'm a manager and I have someone that I want to hire because I think they'll be good at the job, but there's these little personality quirks that I'm not comfortable with, how can I recognize someone who may not be open to telling me they're HFA, that they may be HFA, and that's okay. I just have to account for that.
So So yeah, there's always going to be people who don't want to share that, and I've actually had people like I've had like people come to my talks and they have HFA and like, so and they're willing to tell me, but they're like, well, I have people who, like, I have friends who don't want to tell their managers because they'll be treated differently, or they have had the experience of being treated differently. And I don't think it's ever a good idea to force someone to tell them or force them to reveal it. That's with ADA, like, I don't think it should be you're forced to tell anyone. If you need to utilize the ADA rights and that's where you choose to tell it, then that's fine. But like being forced to disclose a condition, I don't think is as a good thing, because it's the choice of the individual to share this. And like I said, things come up. Like the reason I share it is because I know things are going to come up that affect people, and I'd rather they understand. But if somebody doesn't want to share it and they don't want to, and that things happen and their managers don't know that, then I mean, there's nothing that the manager can really do. Like if they don't know, if they suspect it, then I mean, take into account these points, because these points, like, I'm not telling you to do anything like super special that would negatively impact a neurotypical person or someone that, you may be incorrect about, because it's a lot about just phrasing things and the way you handle situations. So try handling the situations in different ways. Like if you think, oh, like it seems they're not responding to my typical management methods, like maybe I'm managing in a way that's not clicking with them. You know, I've heard that there's some things that can help. Maybe you attempt these management styles, because there's nothing in here. It's not like drug prescriptions or something where I'm screwing with your body chemistry or anything. These are simple communication techniques that I find work for me and other individuals with autism. So there's no harm in trying it if you think it might help an individual that doesn't seem to be meshing well with traditional management techniques.
That's awesome.
But that's what good managers do. Find what not just HFAs, but neurotypical as well.
Yeah.
Respond to, right? So
yeah, and that's when I bring up my one-on-one, I'm like, even though my talk is for neurodiversity, like when I say one-on-ones and mentoring and stuff like that is important, I'm really talking about for all employees, because the thing is, like, while I'm giving tips specific to, like, while I'm calling out high functioning autism and neurodiversity, and even specifically I'm looking at InfoSec, like in the end, this applies to all mindsets, neurotypical and neurodiverse in any industry and stuff. A lot of this comes down to recognizing the strengths in individuals, not their weaknesses, which again, neurotypicals have that. You all have strengths and weaknesses. They may be different from the strengths and weaknesses of someone with autism, but you have strengths and weaknesses. And learning how to communicate with a person based on the way that they communicate and they understand communication. And again, that though there's some specific things associated with high functioning autism that needs specific communication styles, everybody has their own way of communicating and understanding communication.
Fantastic. Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah, we're well over the time that we are trying to set a goal for ourselves. I apologize. Well, I don't apologize, because this was an awesome discussion. So, I don't have any more questions. Ms. Berlin, do you have any? Mm-mm. Mr. Betcher, how about you?
I've got like 1,000 questions, but time.
Yeah.
But Megan, do you? That seemed like a good wrap up, but is there anything else you wanted to bring up for us to talk about for a few minutes?
I mean, I think we hit everything. That's the final point I always like to give, is that, yeah, I'm advocating for neurodiverse people, but really I'm just advocating for focusing on strengths and communicating better. So
I think that's in order to be a successful manager, you really, really need to be able to recognize the strengths of your team and to hire for strengths as well.
Yeah.
Just check out the show notes. All the info is in there, including a link to your slides if you're willing to give that out.
Yep. You guys can go ahead and share that.
You're always updating them and making it better. So
Cool.
if you have a chance to see the talk at a con near you, Megan, how many cons have you been to with this talk so far?
Probably 6 or 7. I have ISSW on April 11th, so next week from when we're recording. And then I'm going to be at SourceConf in Boston in May,
Nice.
and I have a few more on the roadmap that aren't announced yet. So
Very cool.
Nice.
Very nice. So, Ms. Megan, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to maybe they're HFA as well, or maybe there's managers out there who want to improve their own management skills and help understand how HFA people can help their company?
Yeah, I'm very reachable, and I used to not, but now I regularly check Twitter. So it's at Megan, MEGAN _ Roddie, RODDIE. And I will probably, if you want to communicate more, get in touch with you via email, but reach out to me there.
Excellent. And Ms. Berlin, back from vacation, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to discuss anything that you're doing right now? I know you're going to be at headlining at some cons soon, so maybe you could tell us where you're going to be at.
Yeah, so the next couple of months, I will be at let's see here, Converge in Detroit and NolaCon and Show Me Con, and then I'm going to Digital Forensics one this weekend, and then besides Nashville.
Cool. Excellent.
And then on Twitter at InfoSister or on our awesome Slack channel.
Fantastic. Mr. Betcher, same thing. People want to reach out about, we just had a BDIR show, so they can reach out and listen to you and Mr. Goff on the Breaking Down Incident Response show. Or, how would they get a hold of you if they wanted to talk about things that you're creating for making fat, filthy stacks of lucre?
Oh, yeah. Check me out. log-md.com is my website where I talk about all the things logging and incident response. And of course, my handle on Twitter is @BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED.
That's one of those play on word things too, isn't it? Betcher Pwned. Yeah.
So it's mine.
Yeah, yes, it is.
But just not with my name.
Oh, right. That's it. Yeah. So, the official show podcast, Twitter is @Breaksec, BRAKESEC. You can follow me on Twitter @BryanBreak, BRYANBRAKE. Ms. Berlin mentioned our Slack. It's phenomenally large and very nice. We have a lot of people on there. We're over 1,100 people, I assume. Fairly, about 400 active accounts. It's often a misnomer. People are like, oh, we got 2,000, people on our Slack. Yeah, there's like 800, inactive accounts, and that doesn't really count in my book. So, our train just went by, apparently. No, it's not that's cool. No, I always like hearing those kinds of things in the background when we're interviewing people. So, we have Patreon. Thank you for our patrons for supporting the show. Everything you're doing helps for hosting and equipment upgrades and helping us get things like potential merchandise and swag. So appreciate you, Ben, for upping your amount that you're using to support the show. So thank you for that. And our reverse engineering and assembly course with Matt Miller started Monday night on the 2nd of April. It's going fantastically well. If you want to get in on it, there's still 7 weeks worth of courses. So there'll be a link in the show notes if you want to learn about assembly and reverse engineering using x64 debug and binary engine, those things, NASM. We're getting right down into the nitty gritty of that. So if you are interested in doing that, the syllabus is on the show notes on www.breakingsecurity.com. That's BRAKEING security.com. So we're on iTunes. If you listen to iTunes, feel free to leave feedback. We wouldn't hate on that. Google Play Store. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Am I forgetting anything?
I don't know. I forgot.
See, Focus isn't in your top 5, so that's...
how do you get to the Slack channel.
Oh, yes. Very good. Thank you, sir.
You can just click your bot, right?
Yeah, no, we got rid of the bot because we're afraid of bots. So you can send a DM on Twitter, or you can email bds.podcast@gmail.com, and you can reach out and do that. So that would be great if you could do that. I'm done. Thank you, Megan, for coming on. If you have anything else you would like to talk about in the next 6 months, I'm trying to communicate as though without being objective. Subjective. I want to be objective. So in the next 6 months, if you have anything you want to come on and talk about, please feel free to do so. We would definitely love to have you back on to talk about anything you want to talk about.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Fantastic. So that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Have a great week. Be nice to one another, please. And we will talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.